Thank you, Judah. Next up, we have Octavia.
Hi, I am Octavia Brown. I go to Jordan High School, and my research topic / paper was on the inequitable academic tracking and how it affects AP class enrollment. And I specifically chose this topic because last year I took my first AP class at Jordan High School, and I was one of 4 black kids in a class of 25. And I wanted to know why, since my school is majoritively black and brown students, that did not also show up in those specific classes. So my introduction for the topic in general. Knowledge is power, so it's very fitting that in America there are so many systems set up in place to limit the knowledge being given to marginalized groups of color, specifically black and brown bodies. And my research question was, how does tracking contribute to low college prep enrollment for students of color? My thesis statement was, academic tracking starts in elementary school, discouraging black and brown bodies from achieving academic rigor, and can prevent enrollment in advanced placement classes later down the line. So I have a few key terms up here. Academic tracking is the first one. I speak about it a lot, and I have gotten questions on what it even is, and so I think it was imperative to define it. But for academic tracking, it's the process which early on in your education, career, I guess, you get tested and you get placed into certain classes, and your curriculum is supposed to reflect the way that you tested. And for advanced placement classes, or AP classes, they were started by College Board, and they're supposed to mimic the rigor that college classes would have. And if you test at the end of the class well, you can get credit for the classes. AIG is a term specifically used in the South for academically and intellectually gifted classes, and those show up early in elementary school. The achievement gap is the statistical significance between how well white and male students perform compared to black and brown bodies and women. Equity is the idea that everyone deserves their own specific amount of resources to achieve the same end goal. Representation is the idea that historically black and brown bodies have not been in the media portrayed positively or at all, and so we have to do our best to combat that. Black is what I'm going to be using to refer to descendants from Africa or African American people, and brown is what I'll be using to refer to Hispanic or Latino people, and for the data, we don't have much on indigenous people from South or Central America. And detrack is a word that I'm using to define systems or schools that don't specifically have tracking set up in there. So that's a lot of words, but those are my key terms for the paper. So my methodology and my limitations. This paper I had to use secondary research on because we didn't have the time to go out and do the research myself. So I had to rely on everyone else's work previously done and build upon it. But most of my journals and my academic things came from Google Scholar or Gestor, I think. And I also utilized data from the National Center of Education Statistics. But my limitations were specifically that I limited the definition for minority to African American and Hispanic students because it's been proven that Asian Americans show up at higher levels than even sometimes white people in AIG classes or AP classes. So the history of tracking. I have a quote that I got from Tom McCradle, and it says that the Hampton-Tuskegee model that prepared students for subservient jobs for blue-collar professions was forced onto a lot of historically liberal Southern schools because no one else would give them money. This phenomenon took place after desegregation, and it started this way because a lot of people realized that we could no longer stop black and brown bodies from getting the resources they previously were denied being in black schools specifically. So they had to find a way to stop them from achieving as much as they could. And so they made a curriculum that would not prepare them to be good learners, would prepare them to be good workers. And in the South, black parents were kind of like taking white flight and putting them into more charter schools. And so they decided that the only place the Southern schools could get money from were from people who would only support this model of teaching, which forced it onto those schools. So how does this relate to AP classes? I took this picture from College Board's About Us page, and I highlighted some sections. They were driven to connect students to college success and opportunity, and they are dedicated to promoting excellence and equity in education. So their mission statement sounds really fun and very interesting, and it seems like it's a good one, and they're really trying to expand access to college. But if you look at the data, for the demographics of AP classes, Black students in 2013 make up only 23% of AP classes, while white students make up 40%. And the reason why this data is so old is because College Board has also decided to stop sharing data as it comes to racial lines. They no longer want to show that. So this is why it's so old, and that's why it's very interesting, because they claim to support equity and all these great big things that are important, but also don't want to show how many Black and brown students are showing up in these classes. So I have a few reasons as to why this may be. There's an information gap. Specifically for AP and AIG classes, depending on the school and the district and the state even, there can be multiple different ways to enroll in these classes. For some AP classes, you have to just have the prerequisites. For others, you have to be tested into them. For AIG classes, you have to be tested into them, or you can have your parents. There's a lot of different ways to sign up for them, and the variability between these things can cause a lot of people to not be able to pursue what they should be doing. Another thing could be the social reinforcement. I got this from a research paper that Dr. Day already did, but it specifically says that by the beginning of 12th grade, 62% of Black students and 63% of Hispanic students were eligible to take an advanced math course, but only 23% of those eligible Black students and 25% of those eligible Hispanic students actually took an advanced math course. And what I learned from this paper was that this system of tracking has been in place for so long that there has now become a cyclical cycle of younger Black students looking up, saying, oh, I want to see what these classes look like, and noticing that there is no one like them in those classes, and then being discouraged from joining those classes because I don't want to be alone, you know? And there's obviously the structural issue of tracking is very important, but we also would have to address the fact that now in schools, Black students aren't taking it as seriously because it's never been serious to them. They've never been pushed to achieve the academic rigor that their white peers have. And then also, what are people trying to do to fix it? Well, this is a quote from an earlier on, I think from CREED. They're a North Carolina-based organization, and it says that if Black schools were selected for AIG math in proportion to their share of the student population, over 6,200 additional Black students would be classified as AIG math. There was a specific journal on detracking in high school and how these schools, I think in Texas, were trying to get rid of the system, but as this quote shows, you cannot take out the last cog in a system and expect change to be seen all the way through it. If we don't start in elementary school, then those 6,200 students are still going to be not tracked to these AP classes and allowed to pursue higher education. So what are my recommendations? I think that we should match curriculum to student learning styles so they all stay on the same level. It's kind of not probable because you can't just expect everyone to get rid of the different curriculums, but I think that if instead of tweaking it so people get a lower level of curriculum or a lower level of rigor, we teach to their style, because I'm personally an audio learner, and so if I don't learn that way, it's going to be hard for me to process that information. So if we can find a way to actually teach students to the same level so they all get to high school on the same level, then we don't have to worry about them not being allowed into the door or even onto the application sheet. And my conclusion, historically the system of tracking has been set up to punish Black and brown bodies, and in contemporary times it continues to do so. With AP classes being a vital part of any college application, the system not only affects them in high school, but follows them into higher education. And these are my pictures, and that's it. Does anyone have questions? Yes.
Did you find any data about Black and brown students' participation in, say, dual enrollment or community college classes as opposed to AP?
I think that's a little bit higher, but there's still a disparity among them. I know specifically, like in Jordan, they just made the AVID program, so that's helping a lot, but there's still just one school, you know? I think you had a question?
Yes, I did. Can you speak to the difference in like the AIT students in like elementary school versus high school? Did you find that there are more students that qualify in elementary school than in high school or vice versa?
I didn't find any data specifically on that, but I do know that in elementary school, there are a lot of people who are eligible, they just didn't know. They didn't know, you know? Yes.
I think your work was really outstanding. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you had if you thought to break out between male and female among African American.
I hadn't looked at that specifically, but I would be interested in researching that further and elaborating on this question later on. Is that all? Thank you.